Model Making Guru is sponsored by emodels.co.uk, your one-stop shop for all your model making needs. emodels.co.uk. Make something awesome. Hey everyone, it's Fox from Model Making Guru here. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to part 2 of our build of the Games Workshop Citadel / I never know which one to use. Space Wolves Stormwolf gunship, a Stormfang variant from the Warhammer 40K. And any other words that need to go on that title, because there are many words in the name. Welcome to part 2. If you remember in the last episode, we got the cockpit all painted up. That's now pretty much done. There's nothing else to do in there. Apart from paint the pilot, obviously. Put the Space Wolf himself, the Space Puppy. So we're going. Hopefully I might be able to get him done in this episode. If not, I might split it into the next episode, just to keep like discrete steps in this series. Also, we've got some other stuff to do and that might take too long, so we might just do some other bits today and we'll get to him in the third episode, but we'll see. So that's been done. If you remember as well, I did start work on the interior, the sort of the passenger area where the Space Marines go, or the Space Wolves, because this is a drop ship effectively, a troop transport. But I couldn't show a lot of it because of the way my lighting was set up. I couldn't get the camera in and it was all in shadow and dark and looked crap. I've moved the lighting around a bit and I've twiddled. Now, it's still not perfect. It's still a bit dark and grainy, but I'd rather show you something and not have it very good picture quality than nothing at all. So, how have we done with this interior? Well, if you remember, we painted the same ammo APC interior green over all of it and gave all of it 2 coats of Agrax Earthshade, apart from to engine here. Let me get the other end. Where's the pointy end? Apart from the engine area here, and I'll very quickly explain what I did here. This was painted with the same green, the same APC interior, but instead of Agrax Earthshade, it got 1 coat of Nuln Oil, which kept it a kind of different colour from the rest of this cabin. It was more a very, very pale grey with a hint of green. Then I went ahead and painted, taking influence from Skipper Ted's big 1/48 scale 7C U-boat, which has all the big diesel engines in it, and taking influence from like industrial engines and things like that. Power plants. I painted this bit Mephiston Red, then gave it a dry brush of Evil Sun's Scarlet just to pick out the edges and did a little patch of it there. Gave it a wash of Nuln Oil and then went over it with the Necron Compound to pick out the edges and the rivets. Now, throughout all of that, I didn't make any conscious effort to paint the wolf head logo. I just let it pick up the colour as I was doing the dry brushing for the rest of it. I didn't paint the Mephiston Red over it when I first did it, so at first it was green still. But then with the subsequent dry brushing, it just comes out looking like it was originally painted red, and it's all worn off. So don't always think about what you're doing. Just sometimes just do, and you get happy accidents and things come out looking pretty cool. The tube here was painted in Tallarn Sand, a couple of coats, and was given a wash of Agrax Earthshade. Everything here, all these other pipes and tubes, once I'd done these bits, were given a coat of Agrax Earthshade. This box here and the metallic bits of the pipes were picked out in lead belcher and then given a dry brush of the Necron Compound. And then the very last thing I did, well, not the very last, but I picked out some of the little bits of tubes with the AK Interactive, and you can't really read that because it says scruffy, metal colour 77702 Drelluminium, just for little accent. So like that little bit of the pipe there and these rivet heads, just because it stuck out a little bit. It came out quite nice. And then lastly, I painted some of these buttons, and this little green control screen, I hope you can see it, that was just painted with white scar as a circle, and then over that we used, same as in the last episode, we used the green, the periscope green from ammo. I did exactly the same. I tipped this up so it was horizontal and just blobbed it onto the middle of that raised dome, and it just collected and gave a little white bit round the edge. So that's that. So that's the engine done. So what's next? Well, we want to do some weathering here now, just to make it look a bit more used and battered. Now, we're not going to do massive loads of weathering on the outside, but we're going to do some. On the inside here, you've got lots of Space Marines going in and out, and they all weigh like 3 million tons in their armour, and they'll be covered in blood and gore and dirt and dust and everything from all their battles. I like to think this is picking people up as well as dropping them off. So I'm going to go for a dirty look inside with dust and dirt and maybe a few blood splats. Just suggest somebody's been injured in there and been dragged in. So we're going to get this weathered up. So I'm going to get everything ready. We're going to try and keep it simple. If you're following along, I'm not going to go into ridiculous amounts of detail, but the first thing I'm going to do is some chipping. Now, I didn't do any chipping in the cockpit. It's a bit small and I didn't really want to put a lot of chipping in there. But where this is a heavy traffic area with lots of Space Marines, Space Wolves, and equipment being moved around and they're banging into the corners and their power armor's clunking off the sides, I want to put some chipping in there. So what we're going to use for that, we're going to go back to our good old standby lead belcher. And we also have a bit of sponge in my reverse tweezers. What I've done is I've broken a bit of this sponge off. This is just some packing foam sponge. Soft, fluffy stuff. I think it came from a watch packet. Scrumpled it up and tweezed it, and then I've just tousled the end with my fingernails just to rough it up a little bit. So it's a little bit rough. And what we're going to hopefully do is a little bit of chipping. So I'll go and get everything ready, and we'll do that. Okay, so let's get some chipping going. So we're going to take our lead belcher. I'm going to do it straight from the pot. I've got my sponge in my tweezers. All I'm going to do is get the rough part of the sponge and dip it in the paint a little bit. Don't need a lot, just a little bit. Now I've got some tissue here that's going to explode the white balance. There you go, told you. And it's like a dry brush. We're just going to take most of it off. Just going to get most of it off until all we're getting left is real little chip patterns. Now you have to be careful with this because you will get big blobs of paint hiding away. And all we need to do is start adding these to surfaces. So you're going to get a lot of them around here. I'm just dotting them on. If they're going to come off, I might have taken too much off actually. Have I taken too much off? Yes. I'm going to dot it around there. Is it showing up? It probably won't show up on camera, but it will show up in real life because it'll be like sparkly. Maybe have a little bit up here, but not too much. Not a massive amount. And the thing is, at the end of the day, all this is going to disappear once you put the roof on anyway. Yeah. So we try this one again. Get around the edge. Let's see if I can do it that way. There we go. Let's get some of this paint as if it's eroded away. There we go. It helps when I can actually see what I'm doing, which I couldn't a minute ago. Get some chips on here. Just round the edge. And down on the floor. Down here. It's just a matter of going around and putting the chips where you want them. Okay, so that's now been done. As you can see, we've got nice scuffy metallic-y everywhere. The reason I went straight for metallic here is because the zinc chromate that's put on the metal on the inside of aircraft, when that rubs off, it's just metal underneath. There's no paint. So you wouldn't have like black or grey chips. You'd just have it going straight back to metal. So that's what I've done there, just sort of reproduced that effectively. Now, I was also thinking about putting some little highlights around the edges of some of the metal chips, but again, zinc chromate doesn't work. It's not like paint flaking off, it just rubs away and wears away. So again, you wouldn't really have lots of little highlights all over the edges. But you can see there it's sparkling quite nicely on the floor. It looks a bit obviously splotchy, but we've got lots to do. We've got lots to do. So what's next? Next, we're going to go hardcore and use some hardcore proper enamel weathering products. We have some streaking grime and some streaking grime for DAC from Ammo by MIG. These are enamel products, and you can use them in a multifarious number of ways. But what we're going to do is do some little streaks and splotches. So I'm just going to give them a good shake. I don't know why I'm doing both. I'm only going to use one first. I'm going to basically start with the streaking grime. And what we're going to do is quite simple. We're going to get the streaking grime. I'm going to put it on something so it doesn't fall over. Let me just get that there. Again, spilling these, it stinks and it's a nightmare. So we're going to try and get the lid off. Hang on. Ooh, there we go. It's been a while since I used this. Get the lid off. You have to make sure you give them a good shake because they do separate out in the pot, and they will separate out over about 10 minutes when you're using them, so you can't hang around with these things. And all we're going to do is we're going to take some streaking grime on the brush. In fact, let me pour a little bit into the lid. That might be a bit easier for you to see. There we go. Let's put that over there where it's totally not out of harm's way. Can't possibly knock it over there, he says. Let's just put it right over there, just to be safe. So we've got some in the lid. Take a little bit on our brush, get the excess off, and all we want to do, and we're doing this over the bare paint, so it might give a slightly different effect than you expect, is just do some little lines. They don't have to be, well, not little, they don't have to be massive. They can be massive if you want, but we just want some, let's get some excess off. Want some little lines down the side. And they don't have to be perfect, you don't have to look good, but try and make them so they look like they're coming from somewhere obvious. Like these little sinkholes in the moulding, I'm actually going to take advantage of these and make it look like they're supposed to be there. So I'm going to get some grime build up, and we'll do some grime down the side of this thing. Get a bit more. I'm going to take it off on the back of my because I don't want too much. And again, you don't need to be perfect, they don't need to look fantastic because you're going to do some stuff with these anyway, so just splotches and bits here and there. Get that one down there. We'll do some on the sides. Now you can do this over a gloss varnish if you want a particular effect. I'm not too fussed, it'll look great even though I'm doing it directly over acrylic paints. Let's get some on there. Okay, so that's had 10 or 15 minutes to dry a little bit, and it's doing really well. Because even though enamels take a long time to dry, for little things like this, you don't have to leave them for 24 hours, just leave them for 10 or 15 minutes. The next step is to take some more oil paint thinners. You can use white spirits, terps, enamel thinners, lighter fluid, anything you want. I've just got some clean, fresh oil paint thinners and a flat brush. And what you want to do is you want to get your brush and get it moist in the thinners. And then you want to take most of it back off on a piece of tissue, because you don't want it dripping wet. You want it just damp, like that. Now what we do, this is where the magic happens. See if I can get the brush in there to show you. What you do is you just very gently, I can't really get the brush in now to do it. Let's try this side. You just very gently start to brush these streaks away. Now it's quite tricky to get in here, and because it's not like super sodden, the brush isn't like dripping wet. I can't get the brush in, let's try it this way. The brush isn't dripping wet, it doesn't remove it altogether, it just starts teasing it and moving it around. Oops. You could do this with a cotton bud if you wished, whichever works for you. I'm going to try and tease that a bit more. It just sort of reactivates the paint, because it's not fully cured, it reactivates the paint and just starts dragging it down in the direction that you're moving the brush. And if this place wasn't so tight and confined, I could probably do a better job. Okay, so you can see that's all dried now. It doesn't take long to dry for what we're doing. I left it for like 20 minutes or so. Doesn't take long to dry at all. If you're doing this for real, and if you were, say, layering different enamel effects, you'd probably want to leave it for 24 hours so that it dries so much that if you put more thinners over the top, it won't dislodge it. But for what we're doing, 20 minutes is fine. If you need to, you can blast it with a hairdryer just to dry it quickly. So that's looking a bit streaky and grimy. Next step, this is the fun bit. Next step, we're going to use some powders. And for this, we have Dark Earth Ammo by MIG pigment. It's just basically a jar full of earthy powder. Now this is why I've got the, you notice I've got the paper down. This gets messy. So what do we want to do? Well, first of all, we want to work some of it just into the floor panels here and around these edges, and just maybe at this, do it on camera, maybe at this back wall here. We're not going to go all up the walls, just really on the floor and the corners of the walls. Now you need an old brush for this. Get an old brush that you don't mind sacrificing, because you may have to sacrifice it. And what we want to do is not get a lot. At first we don't want to get a lot on there, so we're going to knock most of this off, and then we're simply going to apply this to the floor. We're going to rub it in everywhere. We're going to make sure it gets into all those little recessed grill things on the floor. Going to really work it into the corners, and this is just to suggest soil and earth that's got onto the floor. And the reason we're taking some off on the brush right now on this bit is because there's two steps to this, the way I do it. First of all, you want to go lightly and really work the pigment in, like really munch it into there, so you're getting very fine, almost like you've kind of applied a pastel to it rather than applied a pigment. So you want to go in and just really work it into the corners. There we go. And then we'll go into this bit here, this corner. Let's do some more. Let's do on the floor. See if you can see it. I hope this is coming out all right with the shadows and stuff. So this is going to work into all the little grooves on the floor. I'm going to go a bit heavier now, just to get some powder into these grooves. Try and keep it random. Don't go too crazy and make it all uniformly earth coloured. Really get it into the corners. Try and work down this corner here. The thing with Warhammer is, if you know the Warhammer lore, a lot of the technology they use is like old stuff that's been repurposed and repaired and fixed, or just based on old stuff. So there's nothing really new. They don't invent new technology. So what they've got is going to be reused a lot. So it's kind of conceivable and realistic to have a lot of real battered, knackered things in the Warhammer universe, because stuff is it's knackered and battered. Okay, so that's going to do for that. So funny thing is, this stuff smells like soil, even though it's not actually soil. I want to get a lot of that out, so I want to get all the excess out. So I'm going to tap it, tapping, 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 tapping. There we go. So you've now got this really dusty earth soil colour thing. Now that's a bit crazy, it's a bit over the top. So what I want to do is come back with my oil paint thinners. First of all, my oil paint thinners, and I'll get another old brush. And what we'll do here is we'll kind of carelessly get loads of thinners on the brush, and this time we're not wiping them off, we're just gonna brush it in. Now what this will do, the pigments will dissolve into the thinners, and hopefully should by that process just collect in the recesses. Work some in there, work some in there, in that corner there where the engine is. Now it may come out really muddy, but this is a kind of cartoony thing, so it doesn't matter if it's a bit cartoony with the weathering. So there you can see now, drying off nicely. Now what we can do, these aren't pigment fixers of any kind. This thinner may fix the pigment in place a little bit, but not too much. Because what we can do now is we can find some cotton buds. If I can find the cotton buds, there they are. Get ourselves some cotton buddings. What we can do is just start to get some of that off the raised surface. Now these cotton buds aren't long enough. I can't get my hand down there. We can start just scraping it off this raised surface a bit. So we're hopefully left with a lot of it just in the recesses. Knocking the camera. I'm not pushing it into the grooves. I'm just keeping it going over the tops. See there, it's coming off. It's gorgeous, gorgeous soil colour. And what we can do as well is the same on these raised bits here. I know you can't see any of this. A bit on there. We'll do some on this side. As much as you want, you can do this. I'll do it on the ramp so you can see. If I can stop it falling over. This is going to be a really bad episode because it's all filmed really badly and I can't get anything on camera. So I do apologise. So we'll take some of that off. We'll get a fresh cotton bud. We'll try and get some of it off these raised areas. There we go. Areas of really high traffic, the dirt will really collect in the recess and not on the actual raised part. So we'll just work it in. So what I need to do now is give that maybe 20 minutes, half an hour, just for all the thinners to flash off and evaporate away. You can go over it with a hairdryer, it's not a problem. So if you wanted to speed things up, there's a big pile of, oh look at that. I don't know if it'll come out on camera, but it's all collected down there and it's got this big, oh it's lovely, big pool of it. So that should make a nice sort of deposit of powder. So I'll give this about 20 minutes to dry. So you can hairdryer it if you want, it's not a problem. Just as always, if you're drying with a hairdryer, make sure the hairdryer keeps moving constantly, and just leave it focused on it because you'll melt the plastic. So we'll see what happens when we come back. Back in a moment. Okay, so with all those thinners now pretty much dried off, I hope you can see, I hope the lighting allows it, you can now see, it's not quite as dark as it appears on camera. In real life it's a bit more light soily, it's not quite as dark. But I hope you can see now, you've got this wonderful trodden in, ground in dirt effect. It's a little bit of thinners down there, never mind. Trodden in, ground in dirt effect, which just looks fantastic. It just looks like they've been on some muddy planets, because think about it, they're all over the place. They're going to track in dirt and dust. I'm sure these things aren't cleaned very often, so not for this bit anyway. So there we go, we've got some mud and shiz in there. Looking pretty good. So what I need to do next is get some fixer on these pigments, just because if whoever buys this when it's for sale, they can use it to put troops in if they want to. They can jam them in here. So I need to kind of, I don't need to varnish in here, because for the occasional sliding a dude in, you're not really going to damage the paint too much, and even if you do, you're not going to see it, so it's fine. It's not, paint's not going to come off here. So I'm not going to worry about actually varnishing it inside, but I will put some pigment fixer on there just so the pigment doesn't come off. With these pigments, if you just left it like that, the thinners would keep it on a little bit, but if you rub your finger on it, it will come off on your finger. So I need to get some fixer on there. So for that, I have some Ammo Pigment Fixer. I'm not sure what this is. It smells very much like very weak white spirits or terps, so it may well just be that. But the idea is it kind of dries over the powder and locks it in place. And for this, it's very simple. All you do is get yourself another brush of some sort, and you get some pigment fixer. And what we want to do, in fact, maybe not that brush because it's a bit big. Maybe let's have a look. Maybe this one. Cause oh no, not that one. One of these. Just an old brush, but an old round brush. All I'm going to do is I'm going to get some pigment fixer on the brush, and I'm just going to touch it to where the pigment is. Now you might think this would dissolve the pigment, and it looks like it is. It makes it suddenly fade, but what you'll see is when it dries again, that wonderful powdery look will come back. It will return. So I'm just making sure it's in the corners here, and I just dot it liberally across the floor. It will spread out a little bit by the capillary actions. The reason I'm not brushing it on is because if I brush it on, I'm going to start moving all the powder around, and it'll kill that kind of powdery look. So it will look a bit weird at first because it goes dark, but it will come out quite nice when it's finished, when it's all dried off. So let's get some in here, shall we? I'm just touching it to the edges, let it run into the corners, and as it dries out, again the pigment will be left behind, but it will quite nicely lock that pigment in place. Now once it's done this and it's dried, you can come back and have a look. If you think it's taken too much pigment away, or it's made the pigment look less powdery and earthy like, you can always come and put some more powder on. And if you really want to, you can. If you want to put more powder on top, just matte varnish it with either airbrush or your rattle can, and that will also to a certain degree lock it in place, and it might keep that kind of powdery look for you. This stuff is best when you've got dirt piled up, like piles of dirt, because it keeps it looking like a pile of dirt. So you can be quite generous with this. Now, if you're making a Bandai kit, don't ever use any of these products in this way, because if you did this on a Bandai kit, the plastic would be eaten alive and it would collapse and crumble and break, and you'd just be sad. So don't do it on a Bandai kit. Last of all, we'll just do the gate at the front. Just touch it too. Don't need to cover all of it because it will do a bit of capillary action. There we go. So I'm going to leave that to dry now. It can take quite a while. Be prepared for an hour or so for it to fully dry. And once it's done, that should be fixed in place. We'll have a look and we'll see if we need any more powder adding on, and if not, bingo, we're good to go. There's not much else to do in there now. So let's go and see how this does. Back in a moment. Okay, so that's all had time to dry now, and as you can see, the sort of powdery, earthy tone has come back. There's still a few little damp patches here and there. The dried sort of earth powdery tone has come back, and you get this nice differentiation between the top and upper green areas and down here where it's all covered in dirt and mud and dust. So you just get this nice variation there. I'm really happy with that. So that looks cool. There's only one real last thing to do now. I was going to put some decals in here, like little sort of caution decals and stuff, but I forgot to do that before the weathering, so putting them in now would be a bit dumb. And that is to do one last little bit of dry brushing with Necron Compound. Now, remember we painted the metallic bits earlier on. You don't just do the metallic dry brushing after you've done all the weathering, because this is the zinc chromate coating on the metal. That rubs off, the metal's exposed. So you want to reproduce that. But the weathering and dirt will all happen on top of both the zinc chromate cover and the exposed metal. So you want the exposed metal to be weathered as well. But what you then want to do later on, which we're going to do now, is there will be some areas where, you know, the footsteps of the power armour will rub the dirt and stuff away and rub off the zinc chromate. So there may be a few places here and there where you've got freshly exposed shiny metal. And for that we're going to use the Necron Compound just for a few little bits here and there. So I'm going to get a not massive dry brush, just a small one, something like this size. And we're going to get the Necron Compound. Where has it gone? It is there. Get some on the brush. Whoops. Get some on the brush. And as always, get some on the tissue and take it off. And the beauty of the Necron Compound is it's shiny, but it's not super shiny. You don't really want to use a chrome colour because you want to just suggest a little bit of wear and tear. So for example, on here, on these bits, where people are going to be walking all the time, the raised parts of these will be kind of worn clean. So I just want to gently, very gently, pick out these raised areas just to give them a bit of a glint. Just a touch. I've only got very little on the brush, so it might take a while. But I want to suggest that there's dirt and grime and the green underneath, and then where there's not on there. I've got nothing on my brush. Oh. In the recesses is where all the dirt and stuff is accumulated, so obviously they stay dirty and green and grimy. But on the raised sort of hashes, that's where the guys with their big 3 million ton space armour will wear that off. So I'm kind of keeping it as best I can perpendicular to the pattern. So you see there, it just gives a little bit of, it's very subtle, just gives a little bit of sparkle. You can see it there a bit better. Just a little bit of sparkle. I can go heavier in some places, like down at the front maybe. And what I will do as well is down at the front where it clunks into the ground, unless they hover above the ground, I'll just do a bit more on these edges here. Just pick out these a bit. There we go. I want it to be subtle. And then on the inside, get some more on the brush because I keep running out very fast. On the inside, I might use a bigger brush for this, because what I want to do on the inside, I'm going to get myself a big dry brush. Isn't it amazing how these just happen to fit in the pots? It's amazing that, isn't it? Get some off on that brush. On the inside here, I want to be really delicate. Make sure I've not got too much on there. Really delicate, and just pick out these raised surfaces. So if I get that on camera, it'd be great. Just every now and then, just in a few places. So I'm being very, very gentle. I'm hardly touching it. I'm running it this way and that way. I'm keeping it flat to the surface. So we'll do a bit more around the front here. If I do it this way, maybe you'll see it. Maybe not. I can't see it now. It's in shadow for me as well. Hello. Try it that way. A bit more at this end. Run it back a bit. We'll do a little bit on these pieces here, just maybe where armour might catch the edges. Just makes them stand out a little bit. We'll put some little patches coming from the sides. Add as you wish, dilute to taste as it were. As much or as little as you think you need. So what you've got now, hopefully, it might not come out on camera, but you can see it in real life, is you've got like patches where it's bare metal, and you've got patches where it looks like the zinc chromate coatings come off, and it's all kind of random and natural looking. That's why I'm going for super delicate at this point, and build it up in some areas but not others. Like do a little bit, and then where you've naturally built up a little bit, just keep working on that and get this kind of patchy effect. Put a bit more down near the engine. People may be working on that occasionally. And that now gives us a bit of a patchy floor. A few little bits around the front. There'll be nobody likely to bang into the bits under there, so I'm not going to go under there. But down here, where there's stuff to catch on, we'll do some around the doors. Some on the sides there. I don't want to do too much on these outside of the doors because they're going to get painted, so we'll do some there and some on the edges here. You can be a bit haphazard with this stuff when you're doing dry brushing. You don't have to be precise and perfect. A bit more there. And that concludes the inside. There's nothing more I want to do in there. I think that looks fantastic. Now, when the owner gets it, of course, whoever buys this, when it does go up for sale, what they'll basically see is that. Hang on, well, they won't see that because that's the door shut. What they'll basically see is, I'm all at 6s and 7s today. I'm so excited to paint this, I'm not even paying attention to how I'm filming. What they'll basically see is that. It's brilliant, isn't it? All that effort. I could have put lighting in this, but you know me, I don't do lighting. All that effort now vanished. However, if you shine a torch in there, you'll get an idea. You hold it up to the light, they'll see. They'll know it's in there. I'll take some photographs of it, so for posterities. But yeah, so all that work. And sometimes that's what modeling's about. Sometimes it's working on things, even though you know nobody's ever going to see them. It's working on things because you know it's there. And I actually forgot to turn the light on. So we've got a light missing. There we go, that's better. Sorry about that. So sometimes it's about doing things even though you know nobody's ever going to see them. You know it's there. And you can take pictures to show that it's there. And like I say, if whoever owns this drops the door down and shines a light inside there, they can see what's in there. And whoever does buy this, I'll send them the photographs of the interior if they want to use it to show to people. So I'm really pleased with that. So that's brilliant. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to end this episode here. It's only a short little episode because I don't want to jump onto the pilot now and have a split episode. I think it's better if I just make the next episode painting the pilot because that's quite a big job in itself. So we'll leave this episode here as it is now with just this interior. I'm really pleased with that. That looks great. Yeah, I'll go and get some photographs. I'll get this posted up. As always, this will go up on available for Patreons and a sort of advanced screening a week before everybody else, and then after a week it'll be released. So if you're watching this, thank you for in the advanced week. Thank you so much for being a patron. As always, don't forget a couple of little things. Do remember to go to the Boom Hut, the Model Makers Boom Hut on Facebook. It's facebook.com/groups Model Boom Hut. It's the best online model making group there is in Facebook ever, anywhere. Over 3,500 members now, I think. They're all brilliant people. If you want to have a community where you can show off your work and get advice and make friends, come to the Boom Hut. I've got paint on my hand now. It's brilliant. Facebook.com/Model Boom Hut. And as always, don't forget, if you really want to help me out and keep this channel going, do please consider supporting me on Patreon. Patreon.com/Model Making Guru. I've added a new tier now for people that just want to maybe do $1 a month. Every little tiny bit helps, and it all helps me keep doing this. Keeps me in kits, keeps me in my bills being paid and everything else. So the more help I get from you guys, the more I can do this, because this is my living. The more I can do this as my living and not have to go and get a crappy job and have an hour a month free to film. So it's thanks to my patrons that you get all this content. I'm really pleased with that. That's brilliant. So yes, so stay tuned for the next episode. We will get the pilot painted, and that's the nervous bit because I suck at painting figures. We'll get the pilot painted. Then we'll get it assembled, and then we'll start the actual proper outdoor painting, the outside. I'm looking forward to this, even though I screwed up and glued these on, so I can't get the paint right. Shut up. Anyway, until next time, thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Go make something awesome. Go be awesome. And until next time, adios amoebas.